I'll just come over here with my little reading glasses and make it a little easier, I think, to go over this. We're looking at items for the objective story, and right here I have a list in Story Encoding of the objective story items we're looking for. We talked about the domain at the top, and there are 4 choices for domain: universe, physics, mind, and psychology. Now, in the objective story that we're looking at here, does this look like a universe, physics, mind, or psychology story? Do we know enough yet to be able to tell? Can we tell which one it is? Well, if it's a universe story, it's about a fixed situation. If it's about physics, then it's some kind of activity going on. If it's mind, it's about somebody's attitude. If it's psychology, it's about a manner of thinking. Now, if we look at the objective story domain, again, this is objective story for all these story points that we're looking for right now, just to illustrate how you encode objective story points. It's not really mind, it's not really psychology. There's a little of that in there. At this point, it's not really physics, because there's not a lot of activity going on, although there was a murder, and although he will be on the run. In fact, it's really a story that is universe, a fixed state. Just like when a boat overturns in the water, and once it's overturned, all kinds of activity takes place, but it's all within the particular fixed situation. So too, a man has been wrongly accused and convicted of murdering his wife and is now a felon in the eyes of the law. And ultimately, in the part we didn't see, he escapes and is on the loose. That is the situation. The objective story is that an innocent man's been wrongfully convicted, and he's on the loose. And as long as the situation remains like that, the fixed situation of the story continues. Now, over the course of the development of the motion picture, and in other clips we'll see, that will become more clear as to why it's not a physics story, because all the activities still take place within the overall umbrella of the situation. If that situation ceased to exist, would the activities continue? No, not at all. If the activities ceased to exist, would the overall situation continue? Yes, it would. And so therefore, it's the overall situation that is the objective story domain, and the activities are dependent upon it, not the other way around. Also, we see the objective story concern. The concern turns out to be the future. We saw a little bit of that here. There's concern with the future of public safety, with the future of his life, with the future of finding out whether the murderer would be found, lots of things, but not too much in this area. The future is going to show up in future clips that we'll have for you in a second. The objective story issue is preconception. People have preconceptions. In this case, all the characters have preconceptions, and we've seen some of them who are preconceived that he's guilty. Later they find the evidence and everything, like the phone message and all, but before that at the trial, they just look at him and how nervous he is, and they preconceive that he must be guilty because of the fact there's the insurance, he's got to be guilty. Okay, finally, the objective story problem, going down the list now from domain to concern to reign issue, and within that issue specific problem, is help. Anytime anybody helps anybody else, it's a problem. Now, we haven't seen that yet, but believe me, as we go into other clips, you'll begin to see how that story point is then encoded. Now, notice that all the encoding doesn't come out all at once. You don't just throw it all at the audience. Some of these are touched upon, some of these are a little more clearly stated than others. You focus them, bring them into focus, you support them with additional instances, you hold some back and let them out. That's part of your story weaving. But what it actually turns out to be that is brought out through exposition, what it is the encoding. How it's exposed, that's the exposition. Finally, there are 3 other items that we're going to look at, the ones at the bottom that go with problem: the solution, the focus, and the direction. The solution is hinder. The problem is, in the objective story, is help. The solution to that problem is hinder. So in other words, helping is a problem here. When you help somebody, it causes difficulties. That's the result of it. But if you hinder somebody, it resolves difficulties in the objective story, the overall story that everyone's concerned with. Then the focus is on control. Now here's something you really saw there. Control. You see, that being the principal symptom of the problem, or the symptom of the disease, And you can see that he's shackled, he's got guards around him, he's held in that room for questioning. They're all issues of control. And clearly, if control is the focus, the symptom, then the direction or treatment is uncontrolled. Now, we haven't seen that yet, but we're going to see how the response to control is a lack of control, which can be interpreted also as freedom. Freedom is being away from being controlled. It's the lack of control. Preconception, that's the objective story issue thematically. We can see that the cops are saying, no, he's guilty, he was convicted, he's guilty. And we can see that the notion about being presumed dead, and that he wasn't presumed dead. You see Tommy Lee Jones in the objective story, he loses his preconceptions as the story progresses, Gerard. At first, he's sure he's guilty also. At first, he's convinced of it. And then he begins to not have those preconceptions anymore. And so he becomes more open-minded towards the potential innocence of Kimball. So here's a way in which a scene came up where a large part of the encoding that was delivered to the audience, a large part of the storytelling, was there specifically to deal with the issues of preconception. Now, Fugitive wasn't written with Dramatica, I should say that right off the bat. And although the editor of The Fugitive has taken my class in Dramatica, and we've talked about other projects down the line, he uses Dramatica. However, it wasn't written with Dramatica. And as a result of that, we know that they didn't sit there and say, now what are these thematic issues and how do we bring them out in this scene? But rather, what we're looking at is a good intuitive sense of story and how that intuitive sense will make a place for the thematic issue to be described and discussed. It just felt like those kinds of preconceptions needed to be brought up, that people needed to have these prejudices against Dr. Kimball and his innocence. A little bit, we're going to see later on, how it's since it's the objective story issue of preconception, that it's not just the bad guys, but all the characters. There are those who know Kimball, who even though he was convicted, still have preconceptions that he's innocent and they don't change. Turns out they're right, but it doesn't matter if you're right or wrong. Everybody, those for him and those against him, are holding on to their preconceptions as long as they can in the face of any evidence to the contrary. Let's take a look now at the objective story problem of help and see how help causes problems. See if you can see how many different times in this clip someone tries to help or does help someone else and has that cause or lead to serious problems. That's how it's encoded as a problem. What kinds of problems do you see caused by help? Well, the first person, the prisoner, fakes having an illness, and so the cop decides he's going to open up the gate and go in to try to help him. If he hadn't have done that, then none of anything that followed would have occurred. If that guy really was suffering, well, then he would have just died. But the point is, there wouldn't be the crash, there wouldn't be the gunshots, there wouldn't be any of the train derailment, nothing. But he goes in to help, that kicks everything off. But still, it could have been averted. What happens then? A knife is drawn on the cop, and the other guy tries to shoot to protect him, and he ends up, I guess, falling backwards and shooting the driver, and the driver falls over, and then there's going to be the crash. There is the crash, and then Kimball says, throw me the keys, because the cop wants him to help the guy. So Kimball is going to help him, but he throws the keys, which helps Kimball become freer to be able to help the other guy, and as a result of having the keys, the other guy gets to unlock himself, the other convict, and he runs off. Nobody's going to help him there, but he then helps the guy. Kimball helps he helps the guy. Boy, this is professional, isn't it? Kimball helps the other guard get out before the train crashes into the bus, and as a result of that, down the line in the part of the story we haven't seen yet, that guard is able to identify Kimball when he's at the hospital, and that causes a whole additional series of problems. So as you can see, help is a problem. The same way that maybe Inspector Clouseau might try to help someone and it would keep causing problems. But in the end, it turns out that it's this helping that Kimball does, not the objective story helping, but the helping that Kimball does on his own, that proves to Gerard that this can't be a killer because he's not consistent with having a killer mentality. It turns out also that help is an issue for Kimball as well. And we'll talk about that as we get farther in the story. But for now, just the objective story, you can see how help in that clip a number of times was illustrated, encoded as causing problems, as being the objective story problem.